Hello, my name is Laurel Kaeferlein, and I'm an early childhood special education teacher. I'm going to talk to you today about specific sensory processing disorders that are probably interfering with your child's ability to attend. If you're wondering why your child doesn't pay attention and they bounce off the walls, or they're staring at things, or they're screaming or running around, and you think, why can't I get them to attend? They might have something that is disturbing their ability to pay attention, and it has to do with what kind of information they're picking up with their senses. So I'm going to talk first about a visual processing disorder, sensory processing disorder. So in this instance, we can talk, it seems a little bit more clear or obvious if the lights are too bright. We want to put on some sunglasses. Some children can't play outside without sunglasses because they're just too upset by it. Other children prefer to be in a dark environment. They're just too overstimulated by the lights. And so maybe their classroom needs to make the modification of lowering the lights or having half of the lights on. Is there different switches in the classrooms that they can turn that off? So that might be an accommodation or modification that your child could use. That's if they're overstimulated by lights. Some children are understimulated and they are seeking that. So if a child is upset about something, and you've seen them stare at the windows or seen them stare up at the lights in the ceiling or stare at a light bulb, and you think, don't do that, you're going to hurt your eyes. Well, they're seeking that sensory input. So we have fidgets in our classrooms, and if you're at home, then sometimes our occupational therapist can bring something like that to you. But this is a very popular one. This is a wand, a light up wand. You can get these at fairs, state fairs and such like that, carnivals. You can also buy this on Amazon or whatever store you choose. But a light up wand it will give your child the ability to calm themselves down if this is what they need, if this is the sensory seeking behavior that they need in order to be able to regulate. And it is possible for your child to be paying attention to you while looking at the light. It may be that he can't pay attention to you without the light. That doesn't mean that we keep it going forever, but it is something that possibly will help your child to transition until he learns how to sensory regulate. So that's one of those kind of things that we have. Let's go to auditory. So if your child has an auditory processing disorder, sensory processing disorder, that is, I'm not talking about a hearing loss, but I'm talking about one where they're overstimulated by sound, and they're going like this, or they scream when you turn on the blender or the vacuum, or if they hear a really loud noise, they get really upset about it. You might want to invest in some headphones. So these are my own personal headphones. I don't expect you to go out and buy some Bose headphones, but these do have sound canceling in them. A good pair of headphones could help your child. If you get even a less expensive pair, if it just muffles out some of the noise, that would help. They make some cute ones with the bears and cartoon characters on them. And I just think that for those moments where your child is just overstimulated, they'll be able to pay attention if they can cut out some of that information that they're trying to process. Some children are seeking that sound. And if you play an instrumental, something soothing, some music, it might help them to sensory regulate. I'm not saying blast Metallica. That might be what they're seeking. But if you have something, an instrumental or child songs, nursery rhymes, something quiet can help them to calm and regulate their little bodies. So let's go on to touch. Some children are touch aversive. They do not want you to hold their hand. They can't stand the feeling of their seams in their socks. Tags bother them. This is a sensory processing disorder too. And it unfortunately just involves a lot of patience on your part, looking for clothing that doesn't have tags, looking for socks where the seams don't bother, maybe switching out the kind of sheets that your child has. So there's that. It also involves therapy from your occupational therapist or from some other person who is trained in touch therapy. There might be something called brushing, where they use a soft brush on your child's skin, and then they gradually increase their ability to handle that input. There are other different kinds of possibilities there too, interventions for touch therapy. So taste. Some children are picky eaters, and lots of 2-year-olds are picky eaters. Lots of 3-year-olds are just picky eaters. They only like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or they just like peanut butter sandwiches, or they'll only eat chicken nuggets, or they'll only eat this. So that's kind of typical. And there's a difference though between a child who only likes Chef Boyardee brand SpaghettiOs versus a child who is gagging at the taste of food that is delicious to everybody else. So that would involve different kinds of therapies that you would again need an occupational therapist or a speech language pathologist who is trained in feeding therapy, because a lot of that might have to do with swallowing and the structure of their mouths. So you again want to find a therapist for feeding therapy. If your child is eating like 2 things, they might have an iron deficiency, they might be underweight, so you're going to want to intervene as soon as you possibly can with that. There are all sorts of lists of different you can help to decide whether or not your child has an eating disorder or whether or not they're just extremely picky. And so, and I used eating disorder, and what I meant was taste aversion. So please forgive me, I meant taste aversion. Either way, that's something we can move forward with. Let's see, what have I done? I've done sight and hearing and touch and taste. Now smell. All right, smell. Some children won't eat things because they can't stand the way things smell. The smelling might cause them to retch, and they need a totally scent-free environment. Their senses are on overdrive, so they're taking in too much information. This is a real disorder. Again, you would need to talk to a doctor who might refer you to an occupational therapist or some sort of a feeding therapist who can help your child with their overactive senses. With children, we have some little ones, often on the autism spectrum, who are seeking a sensory input of smelling things. They smell everything and everyone. I've had students who have come up to me and they sniff me constantly, and it's disconcerting and socially inappropriate. So that again would involve a direct teaching lesson with an early childhood special education teacher or a speech language pathologist or an occupational therapist or somebody else who is trained in that area. So the other two, vestibular. Vestibular is our inner ear, our sense of balance. So if you have a child who spins constantly, they are seeking an input. They need that in order to be able to concentrate. So a child who is constantly spinning and swinging You do well to invest in a swing for your backyard if you have an area of your house where you can attach cables to the ceiling, having them locked in on a bolt and a beam. Having a swing might be a good idea. I've seen some families who have gotten a hammock and a hammock stand so that their child can swing and it's not wrecking the ceiling. That would work better in an apartment situation too. If you could get a small hammock with a small hammock stand or a rocking chair, a child-sized rocking chair, then they've got that movement, they've got the ability to regulate. I have taught preschool classes where the child would not sit, no matter what other interventions we tried with fidgets and with weighted blankets, and they don't sit unless it's in a rocking chair. So you put that child in a rocking chair and they suddenly are participating in class because they're having their sensory needs met. So the last one is proprioception, and this one is where we have little receptors inside of our joints. They're in your they're in your elbows, they're in the shoulders, they're in the knees, they're in the hips. I believe they're in the ankles, but they let us know where we are in space. So if you have a child who is constantly tipping back on their chair, they're looking to find where their body is in space. They might be constantly tapping their foot on the ground. They might be that child that has the pencil that they're tapping on the table, and they're not a percussionist, because if the child is a percussionist, that's totally different. But they're looking to find out where their body is in space. The most typical way that you're going to know if your child potentially has a sensory processing disorder for proprioception is if they are constantly running and slamming into something. So this is the child that runs and slams their body into the couch. They run to, for a hug. They don't come up and hug you. They run in and slam into you. And, you got that kind of a surprise with them ramming into you. This is the child who wanted to be swaddled much longer than all of your friends and family's babies wanted to be swaddled. They still might need to be swaddled. They want 15 blankets on top of them. They might want to shove their legs underneath your legs so that they have the weight of your legs pressing onto them. They're seeking pressure. These are your pressure-seeking children. And we have different interventions for those. Sometimes they need a weighted blanket. Sometimes, in order to pay attention in circle time, they might need to have a weighted pillow on their lap or a weighted lap pad. They might need to have a huggy squeezy vest to help them feel secure. And all of these things, these interventions, I've had parents be concerned. What do you mean you're putting a weighted pad on my child's lap? That's concerning. Well, yes, it would be if we were restraining the child, but we're not restraining the child. What we're doing is we're trying to help him or her out so that he can pay attention. It's just, and I wish I had one for this video, but it's about the size of a couch pillow, and it's flat, and it's filled with beanbag beans. And you just put that on the child's lap, and it helps to ground them, to help them feel some pressure and send information to their proprioceptive receptors. So that is a very wordy 15-minute long explanation of the 7 different sensory processing disorders that your child may have. And I just want to encourage you, if you've noticed any of these things with your child, you're going to want to talk to your pediatrician and see if you can get a referral, possibly for occupational therapy, so that your child can have the most success in school by helping him to feel comfortable and calm and regulated because we all need to be able to see without glitter in our ball.